Our STEM story was designed after the hashtag #HerStory campaign. HerStory was designed to educate the general public of the contributions of women to humanity. Our STEM story is designed to educate the general public, current and future scientists, of the contributions of minorities to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It doesn't just highlight, however, the contributions of minorities to STEM in an academic or industrial sense. It also highlights the manner in which minority groups were used in order to further research and medicine. Because the furtherance of research and medicine tends to benefit the general public, that means that the story is all of our stories. Hence, the name Our STEM Story.
I believe that our STEM story is important to learn the full history of science. So many stories have gone untold just because they didn't follow proper ethical guidelines. But it's important to know these stories so we never do anything like that again.
So I feel the definition of intellectual property to be a little difficult to define because under different conditions it's really hard to value. So I'm going to use Albert Einstein as an example. Albert Einstein initially started out as a patent clerk, and so he would be going through individuals' patents, and patents are these really well-designed ideas that are on a piece of paper, so you can easily see what the idea is and you know who it originated from. So it's kind of similar to a researcher's published piece of work or publication. So that is intellectual property because it's an individual's uniquely formed ideas on a piece of paper, and you can easily trace it back to its point of origin, the individual. However, Albert Einstein, we all know who this is. And if you know anything about gravity, then you know something about Albert Einstein. He gave us the understanding of the law of gravity, and he also developed the theory of relativity. So I liken those ideas, which are very uniquely formed, and he had a very unique mind to come up with these ideas. It's granted, it's based on observations of the natural way as we know it, but only he could put it together in the way he did and present it in 1915 the way he did. So I would say that yes, those are his uniquely formed ideas, and yes, that is his intellectual property. So for me, intellectual property is an individual's uniquely formed ideas. At least at its simplest sense.
To me, intellectual property is anything that I think of. It takes so long to become formally published that any ideas that you come up with should be considered intellectual property of that person that came up with it. Ever since I heard the story of Watson, Crick, and Franklin, I believe that Watson and Crick committed intellectual property theft. This is mainly because they didn't include Dr. Franklin on any of their publications, even though they used her scientific results.
So I'm just going to be fully honest. And as a female in STEM, I'm just going to say yes. But I know it's my bias, but I'm sorry. I'm going to probably just say yes off the rip. However, and I'm just joking, but I do know the story, and I will say yes, in this case I do think that they did commit intellectual property theft against Dr. Franklin. They had access to her work and without her permission used her findings in order to assist or solve a problem, a key issue that later on eventually led them to the correct model or structure of DNA. They initially presented a model that had the incorrect arrangement of nucleotide components. An entire nucleotide, as we know it today, would have a phosphate group on the outside, so from the outside going in, a phosphate group on the outside attached to a sugar, which then would be attached to a nitrogenous base. And then the nitrogenous bases, or the nucleotides, the entire structure, would then be connected using hydrogen bonds. And so under aqueous conditions, it would maintain its shape. Now, what the Watson and Crick had presented initially, before they happened to see Photo 51 and Rosalind Franklin's work, they presented a nucleotide structure that had the nitrogenous base on the outside, from the outside going in, attached to a sugar, which then was attached to a phosphate group. And the phosphate groups for each of those nucleotides were then connected utilizing a magnesium ion. Under aqueous conditions, that structure would fall apart. So had they not had access to her work, they wouldn't have figured out the correct arrangement of the nucleotide structure, which then would not have allowed them to figure out the correct arrangement of nucleotides to give them the DNA double helix that we know today. They knew that they were base pairing, but they didn't know how to put it together.
I am looking forward to this seminar, mainly so I can hear other perspectives from other people. Until now, I've basically just accepted that Watson and Crick stole Rosalind Franklin's research and used it as their own. I would like to hear from other people to see what they think.
I personally would like to just know more about the psychology behind why Dr. Watson and Dr. Crick chose not to credit Dr. Franklin with how she helped them figure out the correct structure of DNA. I feel if I could not solve an issue and it was a key issue with my personal work, then I happen to find something that helps me out, I think it's only right to credit the individual, at the very least acknowledge them. And right now, even now when we're writing our papers, our publications, we have the ability to have an acknowledgement section. We also make sure that we cite all of the work or anything that we're presenting. You normally have a few citations after every sentence in a decent publication nowadays, and you intentionally look for the point source for that citation. So there could be lots of work that's been built upon something that was initially published in 1950, and you still need to find that 1950 article and make sure that it is there so that the individual who came up with the idea initially is credited. So I personally just hope to learn more about why they found, or why Dr. Watson and Dr. Crick found it unnecessary to credit Dr. Franklin with her work.